Okay, good evening and welcome to the November 2023 meeting of the ANC3C Environmental Justice Committee. We are being joined tonight by Earl Eutsler from the Urban Forestry Division of DDOT, who's going to talk to us about the tree canopy here in the district. We first reached out to UFD to speak to this committee after the summer storms that caused significant damage in our area, which is Cleveland Park and Woodley Park up here in Ward 3. So we may address that in particular, but we thought it'd be a good opportunity to lean into our education mission here, community education, and hear more about the work in general of UFD and what residents can do, what services they can request, and how that all works. So we don't have any other business to take care of tonight, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Eutsler, who'll give the presentation, and then we'll have some time for question and answer and discussion.
Excellent. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the committee and the other attendees here. My name is Earl Eutsler. I'm the Associate Director for the Urban Forestry Division in the District's Department of Transportation. I have worked for DDOT's Urban Forestry team for 20 years now, and I have been coming to Cleveland Park for community meetings for almost 20 of those years. There was a gentleman named John Poole who used to invite me every so often to come and speak. And he was also, I think, active in the Historical Society. He was a great guy. I think he may have passed away in the last year. So rest in peace. He was a great person. But I do appreciate the chance to be here with you. And I have a presentation I'd like to share. And since I think we have fairly small number online at this moment. So I would just say if as I go through the presentation, you have a comment or a question, please just interject right there on the spot. Don't hesitate. I'm excited to, oops, I can't share.
Rory, can you make him a co-host, please? Cool.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So again, like I said, if you have any questions or anything at any point, just jump right in. Let's make this as conversational as possible. All right. So I'm going to give you a presentation. Here's what I hope to cover. We're going to discuss the brief history of the City of Trees, Washington, D.C., of course, known as the City of Trees. I'm going to kind of give you the pop the hood on how we became known as the City of Trees and everything we've been doing since just to maintain and steward that status, that moniker. I'm going to talk about sort of legislative history and the funding that's resulted in. I'm going to touch very briefly on our canopy goal. We are a little over 37% covered with tree canopy at the present time. Then I'm going to dive in and discuss what we've been doing to achieve equity in the city, which is something that we've been pursuing now for 15 or more years, and I'm proud of the work of our team. And then I'll round out into dialogue and resources. I have a number of links in here, and I can run through them and share them with you. It'll help, I think. We've really worked to create a self-service portal to give people all of the information they might need to understand the decisions we're making about the resource we manage, and including things like the permits that neighbors have applied for, so everyone understands what's happening in and around the city. So again, don't hesitate, jump in if you have any questions or comments as we go. I always like to start with the L'Enfant Plan from 1791. We can't talk about DC without talking about this plan. It's where we live today. It seems perhaps normal or typical or common in our day-to-day, but when this plan was designed, This was unlike any other city in the United States, and very few cities around the world had the layout that the young capital was planned to achieve. And I love this map because if you can see this compass rose on the sort of upper right-hand side, you can see that it gives the latitude of Congress's house, which was what they called the Capitol at the time. But then it gives you the longitude, and it lists it as 00. This is the first of at least 2 attempts to reorient the prime meridian from Greenwich to the young capital in the United States. Of course, it didn't work. We still consider Greenwich the prime meridian, but I just love what these historical maps kind of reveal. And of course, L'Enfant, we have so many things that have conspired to give us the great urban tree canopy that we have today. L'Enfant designed wide streets that, in addition to being wide, also had these linear parks between the back of the sidewalk and the front of the private property, things that he referred to as public parking, which were these linear spaces. And when you combine the Height Act that came much later, we kind of had the perfect recipe for developing excellent tree canopy in the city as part of the city's fabric, because we have shorter buildings and we have rights of ways that are quite wide and spacious with reserved space for tree planting. Completely new idea for the United States. And it resulted in scenes like this. This, of course, is, I'm sure some of you watching already know, this is 16th Street as viewed from the White House looking north. Today, we would call that Black Lives Matter Plaza, that first block right there. And I just love it because it sort of reveals the way we've integrated trees intimately into the fabric of the city. Same with this view as you look east from the Capitol towards RFK. I mean, what we have is a built environment that is actually in many ways dominated by trees. And it's not an accident that happened. A lot of it, in fact, is due to Alexander Boss Shepard, for whom Shepherd Park in DC is named. And I just love to talk about him for just a second, because we want to put it in historical context. This is almost 100 years after L'Enfant designed the plan for the city. It's 80 years, I guess. And the L'Enfant never saw DC turn into what he had envisioned. And this governor of DC, Boss Shepard, came to power in 1871, appointed by the president. This is just following the Civil War. The city is in tatters. It's a mess. Dignitaries from other countries would come and look at these wide avenues that were unpaved and muddy and just sort of mock the young capital. And so Boss Shepard comes along and he basically builds out the modern infrastructure of DC. He builds sidewalks, sewers, paved streets, and he plants 60,000 trees. He was given $6 million for all of this effort, and his efforts, particularly the tree planting, gave rise to the name, the City of Trees. There was only one problem. In less than 3 years, he spent $18 million, and so he went so wildly over budget. He actually fled the city, went to Mexico, opened a silver mine. Lots of good history on Boss Shepard. I'm sure many of you already know it. But he was instrumental in creating the City of Trees as we know it today. This is a great picture. There's a book written on Alexander Boss Shepard. I think it's titled The Man Who Built Washington, something like that. If you spend time on Capitol Hill, you'll be struck by how it is relatively flat. And that's because Boss Shepard didn't just build sidewalks and sewers, pave roads, and plant trees. He flattened the topography of Capitol Hill. And this is an image from the late 1800s of how he left someone's home, which is really, really spectacular. I can't imagine that. I can't imagine, well, DDOT wouldn't do that today. I'll say that. Wouldn't change the topography around your house like that. So just a really fascinating image. But I love this because it's just a crazy, wild public works changing the grade like this. But you'll notice, what's the street lined with? Trees. So trees have always been an important element in the urban fabric of Washington. So now, 1891, this is 20 years after Boss Shepherd was appointed governor of the district, and 100 years after L'Enfant created his plan for DC. We start seeing maps like this, and you can, if you, I'll make sure that Rorik gets this presentation so you can post it online, but if you click down on this source link down at the bottom of this, you can actually zoom in and out of this map and see how the lines of street trees, which are represented on this map, how some of those species are still planted today on our city's streets. But I love this map because it shows that 100 years after L'Enfant designed a city with street trees as an integral part of the streetscape, we now have the sort of predecessor of the Army Corps of Engineers doing maps of the city and inventorying all these species and saying which species are planted along which block. And there were 12 maps. Every year they would make 12 maps, statistical maps, they call them. And this is statistical map number 4. I like to think that being number 4 means that it was fourth most important asset that they were recording and reporting on. So anyway, a really interesting map. Fast forward another 10 years, you have the Macmillan Plan, which gives us in 1901, obviously, the National Mall that we all know and love. It also created the network of Fort Circle parks that line or surround the district and help ensure that it's one of the reasons, not the only, but it's one of the reasons we have such good park access all across DC. So now, more than a little over 100 years after L'Enfant's plan, we see the work of Boss Shepherd and then the Macmillan Commission, and it results in these permanent park spaces. And just one more historical image. This, of course, is looking from the Capitol towards the monument. And it's kind of fun because the monument in the center, as I'm sure you know, is Ulysses S. Grant. And he was the president that installed Boss Shepherd into the role of governor of DC in 1871. So small community back then, I guess. Fast forward another 100 years to 1999, and we see Mayor Williams talking about the role of trees in the city. And this is a great article in the Washington Post, Mayor working to keep it green. And I was hired near the end of Mayor Williams' last term. And looking back, I feel really fortunate to have worked under his leadership because he was very inspirational and he was always looking like around the corner. He always had a very good sense of what was to come. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But one of the things I love in this article is he describes trees as a metaphor for how we take care of our public. And he asks, if we can't take care of our trees, how are we going to take care of our schools or our roads, etc.? And that sort of spurred people to action. That, in addition to this very famous report put out from American Forests in 1999. And this is satellite imagery that shows the land cover, if you will, of the district in 1973 and compared it to 1997. Now this is 30 square meter resolution. So each grid of the district is 30 square meters. That's a fairly large, it's coarse resolution, let me say that. And so what we know today is that the downtown core of the district and everywhere where it would appear that trees were gone altogether, didn't actually lose that many trees. But the trend was undeniable nonetheless. And this photo became known as the $50 million photo because it led to the founding of KC Trees in 2001 with the $50 million gift and endowment that Ms. Casey provided to establish this nonprofit with whom we work closely and have great relationships. That was 2001. Come 2002, under Mayor Williams, the District Department of Transportation is created, and within it, the Urban Forestry Division was created as well. And so lastly, in 2002, same year that DDOT was created, another act was passed, the Urban Forest Preservation Act. So I think Janelle was asking about special and heritage trees. Obviously, this is the law that created those protections and regulations. And to me, it's somewhat fascinating that it was passed in 2002. The city at that point was still sort of emerging from various struggles and challenges. And so it was very forward looking. So let me move now into to discuss that legislation very quickly and then talk about the funding stream it's created and what we've done with it. This is a chart of the population of DC since 1800. Whoops. Apologies. There we go. From 1800 to present day. And what's amazing is if you come back here, you can see that around the time Boss Shepherd instituted all of those public works, it set the district on an 80-year, 90-year period of unrestrained population growth. And then starting in 1950, obviously the trend reversed and we had decline for the next 50 years. But in 2000, population trends inflected and they started to increase again. And I just think it's an amazing, it was an amazing piece of legislative wisdom that the council in 2002 passed a law that said, wait, let's protect the trees on private property. We think the city is about to have a renaissance. Let's ensure that we're protecting our natural resource, trees. And so just very quickly, I think most people on the call are probably aware, but the Urban Forest Preservation Act, it protects special and heritage trees. And you can see on this slide that special trees are those with a circumference of 44 inches to 99.9 inches, and heritage trees are those with a circumference of 100 inches or greater. Special trees, for either class, if the tree is hazardous, which I should point out is overwhelming, it's 2/3 or more of all the applications we receive each year are for hazardous trees. There's no fee to apply, there's no fee required to remove the tree. But for those trees, special trees that are in good condition and are non-hazardous, there is a fee required. For heritage trees, you can't pay to remove one. You have to either protect it or relocate it. And I'm happy to answer questions about all of that later. Those funds that we generate through this authority go into a tree fund, a special purpose revenue fund, and we use that to fund tree planting across the city. And I'm going to talk in more detail about that in just a second. Lastly, the law, the Urban Forest Preservation Act, allows for the mitigation of hazardous trees on private property in certain circumstances and situations. And so that's been an incredible benefit and blessing to people that find themselves in financially constrained times, but have a hazardous tree on their property. So again, happy to answer questions about that, but just want to lay that out for everybody. Here's the history of revenue over time. This is a slide from 2012 up to 2022. You can see the sort of general increase in tree fund contributions year over year. A dip or two here or there, but by and large, we're actually generating close to $2 million a year for the past 2 years, and we take those funds and we recycle that money into no-cost tree planting programs for district residents and district property owners. So, if you've ever participated in a River Smart Homes tree planting offered by our good friends at the Department of Energy and Environment, DOEE, or you've gone directly to KC Trees for tree planting at your home or your school, in a nearby park or at another public space, we're using tree fund dollars to pay for all of that. And so, in fact, if you apply for a special heritage tree removal from us, you get an automated notification that tells you not only which arborist is assigned to assess your application and review your trees, but you're also notified that you're eligible for free tree replanting. And I just really want to emphasize that because this is an amazing benefit. We're essentially, the law is established in such a way that it's charging the person who's taking down non-hazardous trees an amount of money that replaces the one tree removed with many trees. And so we're generating this revenue and we're not charging district residents anything to take part in this. We're charging the tree remover we're charging the person who's removing the non-hazardous tree up front, the full freight. And we're turning that around completely to make those trees available back to the same types of property and the same categories of individuals from which that money was generated. So it's an excellent program. We're lucky to have good partners like DOE and Casey Trees, and we're constantly working to refine and elevate these programs and to encourage more and more people to participate and take place. I want to talk just briefly about canopy goals. We established that the city established a tree canopy goal of achieving 40% urban tree canopy by the year 2032. This goal was established in 2011. And I'm not going to linger much on this, except to say that having a goal, having an organizing principle allows us, it helps focus the mind, right? And so as a result of that, we conduct land cover assessments every 5 years. We actually started before the goal went into place, but we continued because we had this goal that was requiring us to make progress towards for achieving this 40% urban tree canopy. And so now we've done land cover assessments in 2006, 2011, 2015, and again in 2020. We have another one we'll do in 2025. And why is that important? Well, it allows us to assess existing resources and opportunities, and it lets us monitor outcomes and measure our progress towards goals, right? And I'm gonna don't worry if I went through that too quickly. I'm gonna kind of flesh that out here in just a second. So let me pivot now into what I'm talking about regarding achieving equity. There's a really fascinating, a really striking, and in many ways heartbreaking report from 2018 called the Health Equity Report from the DC Department of Health. And there's a link to the source document down at the bottom of this slide, and you can also just Google it. I think they are preparing a follow-up to this in the near future. But this is an amazing report. I'm only going to share 2 pages from it, and I just want to illustrate. I'm going to talk through what's on the slide, but what I want you to just focus on the map image is the spatial distribution of what is being described. In this case, it's income distribution. In so many ways, DC is like it's like a donut with no middle, or a bagel. We have a median household income that is substantially above the national average, and yet we have almost a poverty rate of almost 1 in 5. In addition to that, over 14% of district residents live on less than $15,000 annually. That's tragic. That's not living. I would argue that's not living. And the Health Equity Report goes through and details many other public health outcomes, all of which are spatially explicit and distributed. But it all spools up to this one factor, which is in DC today, where you are born, where you live, determines how long you're going to live. And the difference is as much as 21 years. That's a demographic generation. And I think that's, of course, that's unacceptable. And you can see once again, the distribution, right? In this case, the darker the red, the longer your life. And the lighter the color, the more peach colored, the shorter. This is a heartbreaking slide. There are 3 points that this health equity report made that I think really kind of captures the approach we've taken. First is health is more than healthcare. Second, health inequities are neither natural nor inevitable. And then all policy can become health policy. And that I think really captures the frame and approach that we've been using as we deploy this program annually. So let me start with this. Let me explain this slide. Obviously, we're responsive to a number of things, but service requests are hugely important to our program. And this slide is showing you tree planting service requests, so those requests generated in 311 by ward from 2016 through the first month of fiscal year 21. So that means through the end of October of 2021, and that's shown in red. And what I want to point out is, if you look at Ward 4, for instance, we got about the same number of requests that first month in Ward 4 of 2021 as we did in any of the prior 5 years in Ward 8. And so what this means and what we observed again about 15 years ago was if we only went where people asked us to go, we would be exacerbating the distribution of urban forest resources across the city. And so we knew that couldn't be the only guide for how we allocated our resources and where we delivered our program. And so here I want to kind of juxtapose a map on the left with the blue color ramp that summarizes tree planting requests in the past 5 years across the city. The darker the blue, the more concentrated the tree planting requests are. And I want to contrast that with a summary of where we've planted trees in the last 5 years, with the darkest green areas being where we've planted the most trees, and the lighter colors where we've planted less. And ANC3C is very well represented in the summary of tree planting requests, but you're also very well represented in the summary of trees planted. The difference here is in ANC3C, we'll get multiple requests for a single open space. And so we can plant one tree and it satisfies multiple concerns. It is responsive to multiple residents, and it completes the stocking on a block. In other words, it will fill the remaining open space on a block. You have very few open tree spaces in your ANC. But in other ANCs where we may have multiple vacant spaces for tree planting on a given block, we would historically receive 0 requests or very few. And so we knew we couldn't rely exclusively on going where 311 requests directed us. So we have built together, and I'm going to show this in a minute, our a very high quality inventory of trees on public space. So our street tree database is truly world-class. On any given day, our team is inspecting and updating the records for 250 or more trees per day across the city. We do that all year, day in and day out. So we have a very high quality resource from which we can plan, make decisions, inform how we're spending our resources, and help make sure we're addressing these equity concerns. So let's take a look at what does that look like? So in the last 10 years, this chart can be a little busy. What we have are green columns, and these green columns are showing you the net number of additional trees that have gone into each ward, right? Ward is across the bottom. So Ward 3, for instance, in the last 10 years, it's been a little over 6,500 net positive gain in public trees. That's really good. But if you look at the blue line, that's giving you the relative increase, the percent increase. And so in that case, it's for you guys, it's an increase of roughly 20%. That's still quite good. That's quite good. But look at what we've achieved in some of the areas where we've had the least participation, but where we also know that the opportunity and need is greatest. Take Ward 8, where we've increased the number of trees by 6,500 total, which represents a nearly 60% increase in the relative number of trees in the ward alone in 1 decade. So this is, I said at the beginning that I was hoping to share with you what we've accomplished and what we've achieved. This is one slide that I think really helps to convey that message that we continue to, of course, plan to allocate resources in as equitable fashion as possible. But this is a strategy that we have been pursuing and have found to be highly effective. Let's move on. So what I've been describing up to this point right now are outputs, right? I've been telling you how many trees we've planted, where we've planted, how many requests we've gotten, and that's great. But there's something that's almost like a widget about that, right? Where I've been telling you what we've done, but I haven't been communicating what we've achieved. And so let me switch into that for a brief second. And if you're not familiar with land cover assessments, these are what I talked about when I introduced the concept of a tree canopy goal. And really what they do is they take all of the land in the city and they attribute it, they describe it. In this case, we're looking at different land types, land cover types, tree canopy in green, possible planting area in that fuchsia pink, that's currently vegetated. So that would be like lawns and things like that. And then we have gray for possible planting areas that are impervious. That would be like a parking lot. You can see there's things like buildings and other assets in there. So we use this and combine it with our on-the-ground tree inventory to understand where are possible planting areas and where do we know that there are street trees and other public spaces that can accept new trees. So when we synthesize those data sources, we're able to overcome the inequitable distribution of tree planting requests and really ensure we're driving the resource where it's most needed. And so I'm going to give you one example. This is down near Oxen Run Park in Ward 8. This is the Wheeler Creek community. And this is Waller Court in Southeast, circa 2005. I think one of the commissioners was talking about having gone to school in Arizona at the beginning of the meeting. And when I see this image, I sometimes think this looks like it could be in Arizona. It shocks me that this is actually Washington, D.C., less than 20 years ago. So combining the two data sources that I described a moment ago, the land cover assessments that help us identify where trees can be planted, along with our on-the-ground tree database, allow us to identify that we can plant trees throughout this community. And so this is in 2010. These trees, you can see I've dropped the little green circles everywhere to sort of show where we installed trees. And these trees were planted around 2009, having been informed with all those resources I mentioned before. And then here it is in 2019. You can see a spectacular greening of this neighborhood. And I'm happy to say that we don't have any communities that look the way Waller Court looked in 2005 left in the city. Our work is never done. We can't stop. And things such as diseases, pests, threats like storms, such as the one we had this past July, are constantly knocking at the door and threatening to reverse the progress we and our partners have made in this work across the city. But I think these results are kind of speak for themselves. So this is wanted to kind of demonstrate the outcome that we're driving towards. And this is a fairly potent example. Okay. Thank you for sticking with me through all that. I'm going to switch over now into a slide that's going to detail a number of resources I want to make sure everyone has access to. And if you don't mind, I'm going to bear with me. I'm going to try to click each of these open and see if you can see it. Let's see here. If I move this, are you able to see this web browser?
No, we can't see the web browser.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
We will definitely get these up on our resource page on our website too.
Okay, great. I can, if you don't, do people want me to go through these resources? I can go through them very quickly.
Sure.
Okay. Alrighty. Bear with me and I'll go through them here very quickly. I appreciate everyone sticking through. I know it's a lot of information. I hope it's been useful. Okay, the first resource I wanted to share, you can see this screen now, right? This website.
Yes. Thank you.
Great. The first resource that's in this slide is just trees.dc.gov. It's a repository of all sorts of information. I hope many of you have spent time here already. I wanted to make sure that within here, we have a site dedicated to viewing, our scheduled tree services. And this is an excellent resource. You can go in and see all of our routine, all of the routine services that we have planned in not just your community, but across the city. And one of the things that, and so, you can see the legend over here. So you can see tree planting, pruning, removal, and emergency removal of diseased elms. One of the things that I would encourage you to do if you're interested in perusing this site is as you zoom in, once you get far enough in, the trees will actually turn on underneath it on. You can pop in and actually see the species, the size, the condition, etc. in that in this viewer. So it's a very, I think it's a very good resource. I would encourage you to take a look at it. Let's see. In addition to that,
Real quick, is this just showing like trees in the right of way, or are you looking at other trees on private properties?
So this is primarily trees in the rights of way and on park and school properties and other public lands. So for instance, this little triangle park at Ordway and 34th is an example. But then in addition to that, you can see that there are all of our scheduled services. So for instance, it looks like we're pruning 2 trees in that park. And so you can observe all of the services that are currently scheduled in your neighborhood through this viewer. If you zoom all the way in, you'll be able to see the trees. And again, here's like Hearst Park, for instance. You can see the work we have scheduled over there. If we zoom into Hearst Park, underneath all of this, the trees in the park will turn on.
Okay.
So you can interrogate this for not only what we're planning, but also the trees, the resource itself.
Okay. This is so cool, and I have found another rabbit hole to be going down. But why I have you on this map, so questioning the right of way here. So if you want to type this address in, I think it's 3900 Connecticut. There's like a troubled large tree there that's like overhanging the sidewalk, but it's on the apartment building's like land. Like where does that fall into this sphere of influence?
Yeah. So what you're seeing on this map are the trees that we manage and maintain.
Gotcha.
So you're saying there's a tree in the green space between Connecticut Avenue and this building?
Well, not that building. It's further south. Near the National Zoo. Yeah.
Okay.
I said 2900. If I said 39, I was manufacturing my address and the one I really wanted.
Yeah. So we could zoom down and take a look. But ultimately, if the tree is behind the sidewalk, it's the responsibility of the abutting property owner. So we're not going to see that information modeled or displayed here, because this is a reflection of all of the trees that we're managing, that we're inspecting, that we're servicing. So these are the public trees.
Okay, so it's the ones that are in the tree boxes.
Yep, tree boxes.
On the sidewalk. But if it's on the other side, it's the property's problem.
Correct.
Just wanted to be clear on that, because technically it's in the right of way once it's over your head, but
yeah. So, and of course, I'm speaking in sort of broad generalities.
Yeah.
The where the tree originates determines who's responsible for it. I'd be happy to follow up with you about a specific address afterwards, if you'd like. Please feel free to reach out to me.
Absolutely. And this is super helpful for the neighborhood in general, because there are a lot of questions, especially about, during the storm damage, like whose problem is this? Is it the city's? Is it somebody else's? And knowing that it's where it's originating is good to know.
Well, let me clarify a little bit, because you're describing a tree that's standing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So right now, that tree is the responsibility of the owner of the land from which it originates. If that tree were to fall, and this happened extensively during that end of July storm, if the tree falls and it lands in the right of way, we will clear the right of way.
Okay.
We do that. In the same way that if a tree fell from your property and it fell not into the road, but across into your neighbor's property, technically they would be responsible for clearing the section that landed on their property. Their insurance would pay to clear that, and you'd be responsible for whatever remains on your property. Which isn't to say a good neighbor wouldn't maybe take care of the entire tree that fell from their land, but technically that's how that would work. So again, this is our map of scheduled services. This is updated every day automatically, so it's constantly refreshing with what we have scheduled Anything we scheduled today will show up on this map tomorrow. Anything we completed today will disappear. This is a dynamic resource. I find it, I built it, I find it incredibly useful. The whole goal is to make sure that the public we serve is aware of the resource management decisions we're making. And even though this map, as I mentioned, as you zoom in, the trees turn on, we also have just a tree viewer. So you can zoom in to this map. And this one's kind of cool because it also shows you the open spaces. They both show you the open spaces, but yeah, this is just another resource that we make available for people that maybe want to just look at the trees alone. I've gotten feedback from people, like another ANC Commissioner, Chuck Elkins, from not too far from where you are, about an interest in seeing where we've issued special and heritage tree removal permits. And so he gave me some good feedback saying, we want to be able to see what's been issued, and we want to know who to reach out to if we think something's being removed without a permit. So that's why you have this information right here with this telephone link. You can come to this page and identify whom to reach out to if you suspect a tree is being removed without a permit. But you can also come down a little further and you can zoom around in. It's going to take a second to load. You get a little splash screen, but you can come in here and you can observe all of the permits that have been issued in your neighborhood. And so it'll tell you the permit number, how many trees and of which type have been permitted. So we put this out there again because we want to ensure that the community has full insight and transparency into the decisions that we're making and the work of our team. Next, let me see if you recognize these names. Does anyone know Janet Miller? Do you guys know that name? Or Evan Anderson? Well, those are the two arborists that take care of ANC3C, and they're just great. And so this is a resource that helps you identify which arborist in the city cares for which parts of the city. And you can click on there and get an email address and other contact information. I should make a note. My staff will kill me if I don't. The fastest way to request service from us is via 311.dc.gov or by calling 311. But it is nonetheless very helpful to understand who is working where across the city. And so I share that resource. Okay, lastly, this one is a little bit wonky, but I hope that you like it. We're making so many decisions each year about how many trees to plant. We plant 8,000 or so trees a year. We want to make sure that we're making the best possible decisions. So we're taking into account the climate change impacts. We're taking into account the risk of pest and disease threats, both unknown and known and expected, so that we're ensuring we're planting a resilient forest that's prepared to face the challenges that tomorrow's climate is going to present. And so how do we do that? Well, we have to understand in excruciating detail, what do we have? What is the structure and distribution of the trees that we have? And what's cool about this is it's interactive, and you can come in and, for instance, select a ward. We have in Ward 3, for instance, a little over 30,000 trees. And if we expand this chart here, you can start to see the distribution by species. So yeah, willow oak, your most predominant species, followed by red maple, followed by red oak. So really, really good information, but that's still too coarse to really make informed decisions about what's the most appropriate plant to select. So we can dive in further and zoom into ANC3C. And when we get there, let's see, what do we have? We have 4,700 trees. And quite all of a sudden, you can start looking at the distribution by genus and see how that compares to the distribution of trees citywide. And then you can dive in further and explore by a single member district if you're so inclined. So that's the first tab. And we use this to look and identify what is the structure and composition of the forest at that neighborhood level planning scale, where each individual tree species selection can have the largest impact on ensuring the most resilient forest possible. And so that's where we go. But what I think is what I like to do, if we zoom out a little bit and reset this view, we can take a look, for instance, give me just a second, let me reset this view. If we come in and look again at go back to Ward 3 and we drill back into ANC3C, we can now click this tab down here and you can actually, whoops, there we go. You can see the structure and composition of this forest. So you can see the distribution at the general level, right? We have an abundance of oaks. Oaks are, of course, super important, but red oaks, pin oaks, both of those are struggling with bacterial leaf scorch. And so we need to continue to plant oaks, but we need to elevate oaks like the swamp white oak that you see over here, represented here. We have 140 of those in your ANC, or the bur oak, or the Nuttall oak, like you see down here. So those end up being the oaks that we plant increasingly in your ANC, because oaks are critical to our local ecology. But you can also come in and observe the size distribution. So this is overall a very healthy resource, right? We have a lot of young trees. This is diameter. So trees 0 to 6 inches. But the largest class are trees that are 6 to 12 inches. So these are trees that are growing rapidly, sequestering carbon, providing benefits, and really doing a great job for us. And this is not that much different than human demographics. This is a good sign. This is a cohort that's going to continue to age and provide ever more services for your community and your neighborhood. And you can toggle over a little further and see all these interesting details. Sorry, I'm trying to get this sharing screen out of the way. There we go. Like the average height, the average diameter, how much is the annual carbon storage worth, the replacement value, etc. You have 400 acres of leaf area in ANC3C alone, which is pretty spectacular. I mentioned we are using this tool to help identify the priorities for planting. And so to do that, we created this excellent little list that our staff uses. So once they've drilled down to a specific geography and they've observed and scrutinized and understood the composition of the resource there, they can look they can look into this chart to refresh their memory about which species are we seeking to reduce, which species are we hoping to maintain at similar rates that we're planting them today, and what are the species we're trying to promote. And it's become an incredibly useful planning tool. So we're ensuring that our team is making the best possible decision while they're in the field. And if you want to learn more about that, you can click through and read this vulnerability report we created in conjunction with the Northern Institute's Applied Climate Science team, NIACS, an excellent team. So I hope I haven't put you to sleep. I hope that wasn't too much. Rorik told me I had the whole hour, so I thought, okay, great, let's do it. So I do greatly appreciate everyone staying on. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, great. That was excellent. Janelle, I'm sharing this. Janelle, with the reaction shots tonight to all those maps and data was excellent.
Good.
Yeah, so we have time, not much time left, but for questions, we usually we can just open it up. Whoever has a question, maybe someone before Janelle.
I have a couple, if that's okay.
Sure, Laura, go ahead.
You mentioned the $2 million income from the permitting process, and then you showed us those lovely graphs about the distribution of actually planting trees. How do those relate to the 2 million? Are you spending way over your 2 million, and so the delta is made up by city budget?
Yes. So yes, we're trying to use the majority of that $2 million that comes from, so the majority of that money is generated on private property, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to return the majority of that money back to private property through the tree planting subsidies that we offer in partnership with DOEE and KC Trees. So the majority of that money is not being used for street tree planting. We have a specific district appropriation for that. We're trying to return these funds to the types of lands from which they were generated. And I hope that I'm convinced that's the most thoughtful and a responsible use of those dollars. We're generating all this money from a specific type of land. Let's make sure we're using it to replant on those same lands.
Yeah, that's a really helpful explanation. Thank you. Then I just have one other question, and it's not something that you addressed in your talk, but I'm just curious if the city's DOT Urban Forestry Division intends to weigh in at all on the controversy surrounding the Rock Creek Park golf course elimination of 1,200 trees and what that means in terms of island heat and otherwise, purposefully trying to support trees in the city, within the city boundaries.
Yeah, it's really not my place. They're not lands. As federal property, our laws don't govern up, if you will, and so they're not bound.
I get that, but do you write a letter at all?
Yeah. It's just not. It isn't our place to weigh in on that. I can quantify the resource, the impact. In fact, people that are quantifying the loss that that proposal represents are using information that we generate. So we're supporting the analysis by all parties, I would say, but yeah, it's not something that we have a role in, unfortunately.
Thank you.
One, I love that you brought the old maps into this and LaFont's plan. And also, I am a huge fan of the Public Parking Act of 1870 that reserves space. Thank you. I knew I had a fan.
That's 100%. Yeah. It's a super important piece of this puzzle. Big time. That the Building Height Act, early 1900s. Yeah.
Yeah. I also explain how we go off the boulevards and the runoffs of all of that to people. But the Public Parking Act of 1870 is something I would personally like to see restored to the full letter of the law and reserve more space for people's use, for their parking of their personal public bodies and not their vehicles. So it's something that came up with the service lane prior, but I think that Public Parking Act and that reserving of that space, that prominent space for the public to use for what is traditionally parking, was so important in having that original tree canopy, right? And providing that shade and providing the walkability. I'm interested if you know, like, how urban forestry fell under DDOT and not DOEE, the Department of Energy and Environment, because you would naturally conclude that trees are environment and not transportation.
Yeah, well, I would just like modify your last statement slightly to say trees are assets and they're not amenities, right? These trees are infrastructure. I like to tell people it's the only infrastructure that actually appreciates over time. And that's true, right? Think about anything else that the city builds, buildings, roadways, signs, anything. It's never better than the day you've installed it, and it gets worse over time. Trees are the exact opposite. They become more valuable over time. As to why,
I like that, and I love that you have that in that data point too.
Yeah.
It's every parking space that can be replaced with a tree.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, we're expanding the number of public trees, as you saw in like slide 213 or whatever it was there. We're aggressively growing the tree canopy. And in fact, since 2006, the only land use that has seen consistent increase in tree cover across the city has been the right of way. And it's a testament to that, again, is another outcome I'm able to communicate because of all these, the analysis we perform. But I want to go back to your question, why are we in DDOT and not DOEE? The most straightforward and simple answer is because in 2002, when the District Department of Transportation was created, there was no DOEE. It didn't exist yet.
Okay.
So what happened is the district actually, I kind of went through, I could have added more slides about the history of trees in DC. We were famous in the 1950s for the way we kept track of our trees, before I was born, obviously. But at that time, we were within the Department of Public Works. We were within DPW, and we were called the Tree and Landscape Division. When DDOT was created, Landscape Division stayed with DPW. That's who does the mowing of the rights of way. And the Trees and Landscape Division went to DDOT and became the Urban Forestry Division. So that's the background and history on that.
I might have one last question if we have a couple more minutes. You kind of walked us through how it's decided which trees are planted where. It's of great interest in our area now, where we have the pedestrian, the Cleveland Park Promenade, and other parts of Connecticut Ave that have been redesigned, and recently new trees were planted there. So I don't know if you can speak specifically to that, but how was it then decided what trees we would get here in our neighborhood?
Yeah, so I'm fairly certain that the trees selected for the improvements in Cleveland, on Connecticut Avenue in Cleveland Park particularly, are of those, are white oaks, are in the white oak group. I don't remember now exactly what species has gone in, but they're oak trees that are better adapted to what it's likely to be like living there as a tree in 10 years, 15 years, 25 years from now. And so we're working with the staff continually to help them sort of digest all that information and synthesize it in a way that they can then deploy when making decisions. If you're planting, I mean, it's great that we're planting 8,000 trees a year, but if we're not thoughtful and deliberate about how we're selecting which species to plant where, we could be making 8,000 mistakes for the future. So I'd be happy to, we don't have time tonight to do it, but I could go into, I have a whole separate presentation all about how we got to the dashboard I was demoing here tonight, because it really did synthesize an amazing amount of information. But then we've tried to help kind of like focus it and present it to our staff as a decision support tool. While they're in the field, they can say, all right, what's the structure here? What's the best species I can plant to diversify, which helps insulate us from pest and disease risk? And beyond that, of those, which is the tree that's going to be best suited for predicted changing climate?
So you want to come back in December, or?
Maybe, sure. I don't know. I had to check my calendar, but yeah, please.
To get those trees in and the weather's a bit nicer, it'd be great to do like a walking tour too of like,
Absolutely.
Why not here? We have so many folks that even in my building here, we have a landscape and tree committee, and I'm definitely going to share with them. I don't know if they're aware of that dashboard yet, but they will love it. I guarantee. So yeah, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great.
I like that idea too. So I think there will be some follow-up in one way or some shape or form. And I like that idea of getting out in the community too, and taking a look at this, hopefully with more community members too present.
Absolutely.
So, great. So this has been an excellent meeting. I want to give one last chance if anyone has any final questions or remarks. Okay, seeing none, then thank you again, Earl, for taking the time tonight and giving us such a thorough presentation. We'll stop the recording now. And thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a good night.
All right. Happy holidays.